It was fair to say that Elliott King was one of the best doctors at the hospital. He did everything he could to save his patients' lives and health because he was such a good surgeon. Elliott had a big house, a brand new car, and a job that he loved, which became the meaning of his life. By the time he was 32 years old, his personal life wasn't going as well as his work life, which was a shame. Elliott had been with someone before, but they broke up after 2 years of being together. It was the kind of case where two people seemed to like each other, but didn't work out in the end. They were brave enough to admit they were wrong and stopped everything in time. Elliott liked the way he lived, but the fact that he couldn't get married proved his point. There were some bad things about living alone though. The main one was that his house was always a mess. This didn't mean Elliott didn't like it when his house was messy or clean. Working odd hours, night shifts, and hard surgeries took up a lot of the man's time and energy that he could have used for other things. Because of this, Elliott didn't want to clean or cook when he got home from work. It was a nightmare every time the surgeon's parents came to see him because of this. "Elliott, you can't live like this," he asked. "Would you hire a maid or a cleaning service?" These days, everyone does that. His father wasn't angry, and like all dads, he tried not to be too hard on his son. The Kings didn't know what was going on with Elliott and didn't want to get involved in his personal life. However, whatever the case, Elliott knew deep down that he needed to change the way he thought about life. The young doctor tried not to think about it too much though. Not because he was completely against having a relationship, but most of the time, when he tried to start one, it didn't last. Elliott accepted that he would never be with someone again and just lived his life as it was, which some people thought was wrong. Small problems that happened to him every day didn't bother him that much. In fact, they made him more aware and more interested in his own life. Elliott, for example, remembered that his fridge was empty as he was driving home from a long shift. He knew that if he didn't do something, he would have to go home without lunch or dinner as well. He was lucky that there was a supermarket close, which made things easier for him. The man got out of his SUV in the parking lot and started walking towards the shop. It was cold and cloudy outside, and there were strong gusts of wind. When Elliott shivered, he raised the collar of his coat and walked faster. Suddenly, he saw a tiny mother holding her 6-year-old son, while they stood by the door, shaking in the cold. People on the street heard her say her purse had been stolen and asked for $1 to buy bread. While looking at the woman and child, Elliott saw right away they were beggars. She had frozen tears in her eyes, which broke the young surgeon's heart. Elliott thought the stranger was living a very bad life because their clothes looked worn and old. At the same time, the woman looked down every time someone gave her a few cents out of shame. Elliott did the same thing. He took out all of his cash and gave it to the stranger. The man didn't mind giving away all his cash because he could pay at the store with his card. After going up to the woman, Elliott gave her the money. "Miss, is there anything else I can help you with?" he asked slowly. The woman gave the surgeon a strange look and shook her head. Elliott suddenly realized that he needed to help the woman and her child. "Let's not stand there in the cold. Please wait for me in the car. You can warm up while you wait. Just press the warning button with these keys and the door will open." He pointed to his own car and said, "See that black SUV over there?" The woman took the keys from him in a shy way and, after thinking for a moment, went to the car. Elliott saw them leave and was about to go into the store when he saw the boy moving with a limp. Again, a terrible pain pressed against the man's heart. He went to the grocery store and got more food than he needed. This was because Elliott had a really cool idea. It was strange for the man to think about it, but he thought it was a great chance for the woman and her child. Elliott went back to his car after getting 2 big bags of groceries. When he opened the door, he was glad to see that the boy and his mother were already warm and getting better. The kid also liked Elliott's car and kept trying to press all the buttons on the panel. Elliott put the bags in the back seat next to the boy with a smile on his face, and then took the wheel. Inside the car, the woman in the passenger seat tightened up. It became clear that she was scared. She was scared as she looked at the driver. He thought about it for a moment before telling them about the idea he had at the grocery store. "Please don't take this the wrong way, miss, but I think you're having trouble with money and housing. I live by myself and work most of the time. Would you like to be my maid?" I'll pay you well and give you a place to live." When the woman heard Elliott's offer, she turned red all the way down to her roots. The surgeon quickly added, "Please don't be afraid." He thought the woman was scared about living with a stranger. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not like those bad guys from fairy tales. Please help me. I'm a surgeon." The woman looked at the man with worry and saw that he was happily nodding his head. She finally got the guts to say, "I agree. You have a lot of insight. Yes, Ethan and I do not have a place to live. All of our savings were in my wallet when I was robbed on the bus." The kid in the back seat was happy and clapped his hands. "That's really cool. Now I can use this car whenever I want." Elliott smiled and looked at his mom. As the trip to Elliott's house took over 20 minutes, he and his new friends got into a lively conversation. The woman's name was Nancy Douglas and her son's name was Ethan. They used to live in the suburbs, but now they want to find a better life in the city. Elliott had dealt with many people like this in his life and knew that most of the time they ended up living on nothing and saving every penny. However, Elliott's heart sank again when he found out where his new friends came from. He had been there 7 years ago, and the memories of that time seemed so far away and real now. Fall was here and it was raining. Elliott was driving his dad's old Chevy down the highway. Of course, the future surgeon had no idea that his car would break down and stay stuck in the middle of the road in less than 20 kilometers. Elliott was on his way back home that day after visiting friends in the suburbs. The weather was bad. He almost got caught under his car's hood because of the heavy rain and strong gusts of wind. The road was full of dirty streams and looked like it was empty, which made the medical student very angry. When the man turned his head to the right, he saw a road that led to a small farm. What if I asked the people in the area for help? When it gets dark, I'll have to spend the night in my car for sure, Elliott thought. At the time, it looked like the only smart thing to do. The young man was always ready to take action and never looked back when things got tough. It was already pouring down with rain, and the wind was roaring madly. Elliott rushed to the farm, trying not to get covered in the mud that covered the dirt road. The rain was so bad that he could walk for about 30 yards before he got to the farm building. Behind them, he could see the owner's house. Elliott walked up to the house and knocked on the door, his body shaking from the cold. There was a light inside, which made the man's chances of success better. Soon, he heard the key turn in the lock, and a pretty brown woman, probably 30 years old, walked up to the door. When she looked at the wet man in front of her, she let out a soft sigh and quickly invited him inside. The guest couldn't help but respect how calm she was at that moment. This young woman was not only brave enough to let a stranger into her house, but also acted like this was happening to her all the time. It turned out that this girl's name was Vanessa, and she had lived on this farm her whole life. The young woman gave Elliott hot tea and brought him a change of her dad's old clothes after listening to his confused story. To Elliott's great surprise, Vanessa was not only friendly, but also a lot of fun to talk to. Elliott learned that her younger sister worked as a salesperson in a flower shop, and that her mother was in the hospital healing from a heart attack. In a work accident 5 years ago, Vanessa's father had died. She took care of the farm while she was there. Elliott felt very at ease around this pretty young woman for some reason. In his heart, the young man was sure that Vanessa felt the same way about him. Elliott and Vanessa liked each other so much that when they found themselves holding hands, it didn't surprise either of them. They knew that they might not see each other again. That night turned out to be the first and last date. It looked crazy, but only lasted a few hours. The love spell was broken by magic in the morning. In the years since then, Elliott hadn't been to that area and didn't know how Vanessa was. 7 years had passed since they met, so it would be silly to think about getting together now, getting rid of the memories. Elliott carefully asked Nancy what was wrong with her son's walk. "Oh, that's a bad story. Ethan once tried to climb a tree but tripped and fell. He broke his ankle and it moved around." Nancy sighed and said, "There's a surgeon that could help him, but it cost a lot." Elliott shook his head to show that he understood, then slowed down and parked his car next to his house. "Wow, is that where we're going to live now?" Ethan was amazed and said, "Wow." Nancy answered, "That seems to be the case, dear." And then she looked at Elliott. Elliott smiled, got out of the car with his groceries and walked to the house. Nancy and Elliott went after him, It went without saying that the family from the suburbs had never seen such luxury. This was true even though Elliott didn't think his cozy home was anything special or more high class than standard. Elliott made a quick dinner with the groceries he bought and asked the guests to join him. After that, he showed them their room and the rest of the house. Nancy felt awkward the whole time because she didn't belong in the big, fancy house. The next morning, Nancy got up and made breakfast. After that, she began cleaning the house. Elliott was so happy when she saw how well his new maid had done her job. He was no longer embarrassed to have his parents or co-workers over. Elliott said with a smile, "You're a real magician, a real dust fairy." When the man praised Nancy, her cheeks turned red right away. Elliott said good morning to Ethan and then went to work. But the man wasn't at all worried about leaving the strangers in his house during the day. He only thought about Nancy and Ethan. When the young surgeon heard about the boy and his mother, it made him feel very honest and kind. Elliott hadn't felt that way in a long time, and the thought of it made him very happy. Now, he always rushed home from work because Nancy and Ethan were always ready for him with a tasty dinner. Elliott and the boy generally played video games together after dinner. They would play a few games of hockey or basketball. Elliott's talk about his work and past was interesting to Ethan. Things changed in the life of Elliott. It just so happened that Elliott became attached to both Nancy and Ethan in the span of 2 months, not even thinking about a serious relationship, because the way he felt was more like a friend-to-friend relationship. If Elliott hadn't been asked to his high school reunion, it's hard to say how their lives would have changed. The man didn't feel safe going to the reunion by himself, because he knew that most of his friends would be there with their partners. Elliott then thought it would be a good idea to bring Nancy and Ethan with him. The woman, who was naturally shy, refused to go with him at first, but she changed her mind when she found out Elliott's real intentions. The young doctor brought Nancy a beautiful dress, and Ethan a suit before the event. The get-together was meant to happen at the school, where Elliott got his start in life. The assembly hall was full of people. When the three of them got there were pictures on the wall of both the most successful grads and those who had died too soon. Nancy stopped in front of the picture and let go of Elliott's hand all of a sudden. The woman had tears in her eyes and they fell quickly down her face. The picture in the black frame on the wall caught Elliott's attention. He looked at his friend with surprise. Elliott thought he recognized the young woman in the picture, but when he thought about who she was, his heart almost burst from pain. The man said in a whisper, "Vanessa," and took a step back without meaning to. Nancy shook and stopped crying. She looked at her friend with surprise on her face. She sobbed and asked, "Did he know my sister?" For Elliott, it was his turn to be shocked. But what Nancy said next really shocked him. Vanessa was Nancy's younger sister. Vanessa was the woman he had that amazing one-night stand with 7 years before. Vanessa died while giving birth because she was bleeding inside. Ethan is her boy. In fact, no one knew who the boy's dad was. Nancy whispered, "I never told Ethan the truth. I just became his mother." She stuttered every word. That's when Elliott understood what Nancy really meant to him. It seems that the man had spent the night with a graduate of the same school that he had gone to. Now, by chance, he took in Vanessa's sister, and the boy who could very well be his own son. Nancy and Ethan were taken inside by Elliott, who knelt down in front of them and asked them to forgive him. To be fair, Ethan had no idea why Elliott was acting so weirdly, but Nancy knew right away. For some strange reason, fate put the woman in touch with someone who had a hand in killing her older sister. She was naturally proud and wanted to raise her child by herself, but things didn't go as planned. Elliott felt bad about what he did, even though it wasn't his fault. The first thing he did when they got home was call his friend, who worked with musculoskeletal problems. Elliott wanted to give the boy a new life. The surgeon's suspicions that Ethan was his son was backed up by a later DNA test. After proving he was the father, Elliott not only took the boy in, but he also asked Nancy to marry him. The man was sure what he was doing was right, and that Vanessa was watching him from heaven, and agreed with his choice.